KCAAradio.com.
KCAA.
Live and in color from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful Southern California, and in parallel from the Turf's Up radio studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone show this evening.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone. I'm your host, Rob Starr, along with the super host, Mr. Chris Davies. And we're glad that you're sticking with us today, and got a great show coming up. So I always ask Mr. Davey, how's he doing out in Southern California?
It's great out here, buddy. I'm doing fine. A little bit of a cooler week, and which is great. But I'll second what you said about a great show this week. It's going to be awesome.
I hear some background of a radio going. I don't know what that is, but kind of interesting. So should have a good week. Anyway, I'd like to bring on the purveyor of Maven's Notebook, Miss Chris Austin. Chris, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Did you all guys hear that background thing going on?
I cannot.
Oh, there was like another radio playing or something. I don't know what it is.
Oh, really?
Anyway, it's gone. Thank goodness it's quiet. We can do our show, and I'm happy. So, Miss Austin, how's the weather out there in the middle of California?
Oh, up here in Chico, north of Sacramento, we had our hottest day of the year on Wednesday, yesterday. It was we just almost got to 100, but did not. That's about 15 degrees above normal for this time of year for here. Today, it's noticeably cooler, and it'll be cooling down a little bit, but it has been we kind of went from winter, had a very short spring, and then boom, now we are into summer.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing out here in Arizona. It's going to be it's a little less than 100 today, and it's going to be 105 tomorrow. So, but it's a beautiful day. Sun is out, blue skies everywhere, no clouds, and it's going to be good. So tell us what's happening in the world of water in California, especially I hear there are rumors about some analysis was done about the Delta project.
Well, yes, today the state released their economic analysis for the Delta Conveyance Project, or the Delta Tunnel, this project that the state has been trying to do for literally, since the 1980s. So what's that, 40 years now? This latest effort actually began back in the Governor Schwarzenegger era and has progressed up. It's been through 3 different name changes and project revisions, and now it is it went from a canal to 2 tunnels now to 1 tunnel, and the cost today, as they released it, is $20 billion.
New price tag.
Yeah, although that's what people were pretty much saying it was going to be. They actually thought the twin tunnels back in, 2019 or so, I think they priced that at $16 billion, but that we're talking pre-pandemic, a very different time back when they priced out that particular tunnel, the 2 tunnels. So no one's surprised at the price tag. And no one, and the state also held a media call, and there'll be a bunch of stories out there already starting to hit the press about, it's a cost-benefit analysis of the tunnel, this tunnel project. And I think that this comes about because there is a regulation somewhere that says that if you're going to build this big infrastructure project, you have to release an economic analysis, and it has to be positive. Mm-hmm. So they've done this economic analysis, and they come out and said that it's $2.20 benefit for every $1 spent on the Delta Tunnel, and and this benefit package that they have come in, that they've analyzed, includes a lot of things that economists like to add into these things. And I'm going to say this as an outset because I don't take positions on anything, and this should not be, what I'm about to say should not be construed as taking a position on the tunnel, because to me, when it comes to these economic analyses, I just think sometimes they're just a whole lot of crap. When you start talking about, like, they identify a large benefit to avoiding shortages in the future. And yes, no one wants to have a water shortage. But how do you put a price tag to that? If I come and ask you, how much would you pay not to have a water shortage in 5 years? I mean, how would you answer that? How does anyone answer that? It's just a crazy thing. Yet somehow they have derived an answer for that type of thing, and they call it a benefit. I think the situation that we have here is that the Delta Conveyance Project it's not going to generate any major amount of new water. The fact that they're changing the position of where they'll pick up some of the water will mean that they'll be able to capture a little bit more in the correct types of years, but it's not going to add substantially, to the water supply on a regular basis. And it's what it is doing is it is replacing a system that kind of is not the most reliable system, these levee channels flowing through the delta. It's more akin to you replacing your car. Now, your car you're still going to the work, you're still getting your same pay, but maybe your car got old and is about to break down, so you get another car. That doesn't add to your salary or your earning capability. It preserves your earning capability because now you can still get yourself to work. And that is kind of what the Delta Conveyance Project is. What I think, if we were to be talking about it honestly, you can't answer, no one can answer how much they would pay not to have a shortage sometime in the future. That's a ridiculous question. But if we're talking about it honestly, it is replacing or buttressing up a system that a critical system. That's kind of what it's about. Now, I'm sure, like I said, there's a regulation somewhere that says you have to do this, and and I know economists out there. If there's any economists listening, to this show, I'm sorry, I don't understand you. Economics was the worst class I took in college. I barely got through it. It was I just could not understand why anyone would want to pursue economics. Yet I know people do. They get master's degrees in economics. But this type of analysis I just don't get for anything. So
well, that's because they used the new math versus the old math that we all had. but let me ask you a serious question. I know you stay neutral and that's how you do your stuff, and that's great. But can you name one project that they've completed on time and within budget? because it's like the train to nowhere that I always used to joke about. I don't even think it's finished yet. But first it was this. I was voted back in the 70s, 80s,
Well,
and now it's 3 times the price of what it was, and they never finished it. That doesn't do what it says it was going to do. I mean,
well,
go ahead.
the I-10 freeway. When the I-10 freeway burnt, at first they said that was going to be out in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 weeks, and then they put their heads together and they worked and they got it done in like less than a week, I believe. It was amazing. I mean, sometimes it does happen, but on a big project, on a substantial project, I don't know. Does that mean we shouldn't? Does that mean we shouldn't build them, or does it mean we should be prepared for cost escalations in a better way?
Well, do you think people in the government put all this information together with their studies for environmental, how much it's going to cost, blah blah blah, marketing, the whole 9 yards, and what happens when they start it, and then they run out of money and say, oh, it's going to cost this much more? Do you think the initiative of those people who are voting for these things, or trying to pass the laws and approving all these things, do you think they do that knowing that if you say, well, I got it halfway done, and if we just stop, it's just a lot, we just wasted all that money, so we should put more money in and finish it up? I've seen that happen for the last 30 years.
Well, I don't know how to answer that, because and to be honest, that doesn't really relate to what's going on here, because they haven't started to build anything, and when they do, and right now all the planning costs have been paid by the contractors, Metropolitan and whatever. I mean, other agencies have paid for these planning costs. The taxpayers have not paid for these, and the taxpayers will not be paying for this. So this isn't like, the Delta Tunnel is not like a project that the legislature can kill by not funding it, because they're not funding it. It's going to be funded by the ratepayers in Southern California and the other areas, the Bay Area and wherever, that receive the water from the project. So that's going to be built into their rates, and that's not going to stop.
But I was trying to take the negative side of that and saying, okay, yes. So it comes back to the stakeholder, the water agencies and districts and so forth. So what's the next thing they can do? They can raise the rates.
Well, yeah, and they're going to have to. I mean, but the problem is, and this is a problem that we have with really all of our infrastructure. There was, especially here in California, the big post-World War building boom, right? 1950s. Okay, a lot of that stuff had a 50-year lifespan, and it's already been in service now 75 years, sometimes longer. These things have to be upgraded. And they're all going to fail these little cost-benefit analysis, because they're not necessarily going to, well, not all of them. I can see where if you're upgrading an electrical system, there was probably efficiencies that you could gain by upgrading your equipment and your lines, but you will have to pay to do that. But I think, we've all got to get ready to pay more. I'll tell you what else, too, we have. This is a national issue. We have dams. We have dams that have big problems all across the country, not just in California and other places. Dams that are in danger of failing, and we're seeing more and more of these extreme downpours in places all over the country, not just in Southern California, but in Texas and other places. Extreme rainfall put together with dams in failing condition means, there's a recipe for disaster there. And again, I don't think we're addressing that yet. And when we do, we're going to have to pay for that, collectively, we, the country,
Yep. I agree.
Well, Chris, I tell you, Rob, I was just going to say, when you take any time to review or take a relook at something, especially this whole Delta Tunnel stuff, right? Which is, really, if you talk about California water, nothing percolates to the top of the list probably more than this project does. If you'll agree with that, Chris. But it's going to give everybody that ever had a stake in this whole thing, whether they're economically motivated, whether they're environmentally motivated, or whatever, it's just going to give them another chance to raise the flag and hire a brass band and talk about it some more.
Yeah, and be prepared because, the 2 days before this analysis came out, everybody was filing petitions against the application for the project at the State Water Board.
Sure.
And that was I think Monday's action, and then or Tuesday's, and then last week, another group of people filed a petition in court saying that they couldn't proceed with their geotechnical investigations until they got secured some other approvals, and so we'll see what the court has to say about that. They're seeking an injunction, and this is the state's just trying to go out and drill boreholes in places where the tunnel might go, so they can look at the geology of the area.
But when you have, as you said on Maven's Notebook, Chris, right? This is the quote. I think the quote you used was the centerpiece of California water wars, and a good analogy right there. But I mean, literally, it's going to give everybody another chance just to raise their hand and say, look, So do you think? Let me pose this as a question. Do you think it's going to create further delays in the project?
Well, I mean, litigation, that's just expected. It's like, unfortunately, if you deal with California water, then you know it's going to be there will always be litigation. I think that's kind of why the Department of Water Resources, after they finished, they issued their draft environmental report, and then they took the comments, they integrated the comments, they said, here's the final report. And sometimes agencies will take comments on the final report, but DWR, I think, just went ahead and certified it and said, let the litigation begin. And sure enough, with it, by 5 o'clock that afternoon, it had begun. So,
sure, yeah, the line starts here.
Well,
yeah.
So what else is going on that's interesting to you?
Oh gosh, let's see. Let me take a look. I was all wrapped up in the tunnels.
No salmon fishing, Chris.
Oh, that's right. The other big story. Yeah, they should.
How many years in a row is that?
This is 2 years in a row. Really devastating for salmon. Well, the ocean salmon season was shut down, and that's devastating for those salmon fishermen that go out there. But no salmon fishing in the rivers is devastating now to the recreational industry that takes people on fishing runs and stuff. It's and it's just a sign of how troubled our salmon populations are.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything new in groundwater?
Let me see. If you're asking me, then there must be. Oh gosh. Well, we have like 3 groundwater basins headed for probation. They scheduled the third for a hearing, I believe, before the end of the year. So, that's it's amazing. We'll see how it works out. The State Water Board has certainly not wasted any time in moving on these basins that have their groundwater sustainability plans declared inadequate. The agencies in the basins are working very hard to correct those deficiencies because no one wants to actually have the State Water Board give you tell you how to run your basin, but So there's definitely action. It's the first time, our first go around here with groundwater regulation and the teeth that come with it here in California. So we will see where it goes. The first basin, they had the hearing. They did put it on probation. So the State Water Board cannot implement its plan for at least a year. So we'll see what that means.
Yeah, that's the San Joaquin Valley, right? The groundwater basin. So
yes,
and I can't remember. I don't have the article up here, but I think it was the third recommendation for state probation for them.
Yeah. Well, all the groundwater basins in the worst situations were in the San Joaquin Valley.
Yeah.
And these three that are on probation, these are actually from the first set of groundwater sustainability plans that were submitted, and all the basins that were declared critically overdrafted had to submit their groundwater sustainability plans 2 years ahead of everybody of the other basins. So I think that was in 2020. And, these were the first basins to try this new paradigm that the state has set up to develop their groundwater sustainability plans. They were in the toughest situations. So the fact that there are problems with their plans is not really a surprise. Again, to the agency's credit, I do think that they're all working and trying to address the issues so they cannot be on probation. I think every basin that has been declared inadequate is nervous if they haven't got their date from the State Water Board. There's 6 of them, and so 3 now have, one's in probation, 2 more now scheduled. So.
Well, Chris, one more question for you, because I know you mentioned it. I don't know. I think a couple of weeks ago, before you had your hiatus, the quick hiatus there, is the hot weather that the Central Valley has been experiencing, and you up there in Chico, you just mentioned earlier. You had the hottest day of the year, day before yesterday or whatever. Is that what's the snow levels look like? I mean, is it melting that snow really quick, really fast?
Oh yeah. Oh, that. Yeah, it is, and the water's very cold. It's not causing flooding issues, but it's causing, sadly, and this happens every year, lots of people dying, unfortunately. I think already at least 5, 7, and they're mostly kids. They get swept away in the current.
Rapid.
Yeah, it's like when I moved to Southern California, I had my kids, I was always so worried about the ocean. What if they go to the ocean? But, it's very hard to find an unlifeguarded beach in Southern California, and, you're relatively safe there. The rivers are actually so dangerous because they got the current, and they're cold, and they can run strong, and they sweep kids away. So if anyone's going to go recreate on a river this year, and you got little ones in the water, or even older people, like a mother died trying to help her 11-year-old that was struggling in the water, and the 11-year-old got out and the mom didn't. So, just be real careful, because it's really sad. Rivers are beautiful things, but they're very powerful, and never take them, for granted. Oh.
That's certainly a truism. Well, Chris, we're coming up to our commercial break, and as always, we want to thank you personally for being part of the show every week. And I told you I bumped into some people who gave you compliments, which I told you earlier about. So, you do a great job in what you do. And anybody who's listening, please go to mavensnotebook.com, become a subscriber, get the best of water information, news that's happening around, and you can also be a sponsor if you'd like. And that's a good way to do it. And you get some special things. And she has a really neat website And I think we should do a show, part of the show on what your stuff looks like and how they can navigate through it and all the things, because that's a pretty good way to get people interested in it. So
yeah,
Chris,
one more thing, Rob, real
Yeah.
quick, just a shout out to Chris on great interview on the ripple effect, Chris. Podcast that colleagues of ours that you did last week. I think it was put out earlier this week. Great interview. You did awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad it didn't sound like an idiot.
No, you never do. And you still make me laugh when we went up to the Society for Irrigation Consultants when you were giving your speech at that place. You made me laugh so hard, and you did a great job with that. So we appreciate that, and they appreciated it. So, Chris, we will see you and talk to you next week. I want you to have a beautiful weekend, have fun, be safe, and we will talk to you next week.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Have a great week, Chris.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back after our commercial, and we have a very special guest coming on, and stick around. It's going to be an interesting conversation. So we'll be back in just a few moments.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda, sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932, protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.
Are you presently part of the irrigation industry as a worker or business owner? Do you want to learn how you and your staff can boost your knowledge and productivity? Then you should check out Irrigator Technical Training School. Irrigator Tech is the leading source of quality instruction serving all facets of the irrigation industry. Their courses provide a basic, easy-to-understand approach that raises the skill level, competency, and professionalism of landscape and irrigation personnel through practical education and services. Irrigator Tech combines classroom and real-life hands-on training, leading to a well-recognized certification that both customers and employers demand. Irrigator Tech's specialized courses can help you quickly become a certified irrigation auditor or a certified installer, repair, maintenance, or backflow technician. Courses also include certificates in smart water application or becoming a certified tree worker. Most importantly, all certifications are state recognized, and Irrigator Tech offers annual renewal classes to help keep your certification up to date. So whether you work in California, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, or Arizona, there's an Irrigator Tech class near you. For more information on how to jumpstart your career, call Irrigator Tech toll-free 866-614-1755 or visit them on the web at irrigatortech.com. That's toll-free 866-614-1755 and on the web at irrigatortech.com.
Get ready, because the forecast for this May through June is a torrential downpour of points. Site One is proud to introduce our exclusive NDS Point Storm 24 event. Partners Program members who use drainage, hardscapes, and irrigation products can earn up to 4x the rewards in May and June for purchasing quality NDS products. That's 4x the points on a whole range of product solutions for residential and commercial projects. NDS is a leader in water management solutions and is known for superior quality and performance, as well as ease of installation and extreme durability. You can count on Site One and NDS to help you grow your business. NDS Point Storm 24 from May through June. It's the perfect storm of points and performance.
KCAA.
All right, so welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone. I'm Rob Starr along with Mr. Chris Davey, and we are the hosts of the Water Zone. I hope everybody's having a great week. And we have every week we try to have a special guest, and this one we have a very good person who I've known, I guess, for probably almost 18 years, and met him through some different committees with the Irrigation Association and some other things, and I'd like to bring him on. His name is Stephen Moore, and he is the owner of Stephen Moore Water Management. So, Steve, welcome to the Water Zone.
Rob, thanks so much. It's great to be here. Appreciate all the work you're doing.
We try. When I grow up, I want to be just like you, so I'm trying hard. Trying hard. But Obviously, you and I talked a lot over all these years and stuff, but the audience wants to get to a little bit know about you. But I always ask this opening question of everybody because we want to make this an informative show, but we also want to be personable with the people that we bring on the show. So, what drove you to come to this water industry? Was that always your thing, or how did you get interested in it, and what was your background? And tell us a little about that history.
Gosh. Yeah, well, I graduated in landscape architecture. I've always loved loved plants, loved the landscape, and but as I got out of school and started working for a contractor, learned a lot of things, but I was drawn to irrigation and fascinated by all the technology that is needed to just keep a plant healthy and alive. And so I really began to focus on irrigation, went to work for an irrigation distributor and got involved with weather-based control. I remember seeing a weather station hooked up to a PC and going, wow, this is awesome. You mean that weather station can control my sprinklers? That's great. And ended up, selling selling products like that. And then I founded a company because I said, this stuff's too complicated and too expensive. And so can we figure out a way to make it cheaper? And we think we did, and partnered with the Rainbird Company and ended up selling that business to Smart Rain in Utah. And now I'm an irrigation consultant. So, it's been a good career, and I love looking for ways to improve water use efficiency, but never compromising the health of a landscape.
So you can say you had a real thirst for the industry. Pun
intended, huh?
Yeah. As everybody tells me, don't just keep my day job and don't worry about being jokes anymore. But I'm going to let my water wizard, Mr. Chris Davey, jump in and say hi and get some questions going for you. Chris?
Bob, I didn't realize you were going to be so fast on being quick at the humor, man. But I'm impressed. And Steve, welcome to the show.
Well, Chris, thank you. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't have an 18-year background with you, Steve, for sure. But being in this industry for 45 years, like I have, I've certainly known who you are. I know you and I have talked before at shows and things like that, especially back at the time when I was at Rainbird and you were with Campbell, were you talking to Campbell Scientific? And I know we've had a couple of conversations.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, in the past, but and now you've got more water management. Which when I saw it the first time, I said, well, that's kind of like a double entendre, isn't it? More water management.
Maybe I should be calling it less water management, right?
Yeah, you don't have the right name for that, but Steve will let that go. But also got to say, love the photo on the website, buddy. That's good. That holding the hose there as a 4-year-old or 3-year-old, whatever that was.
Yeah, I was about 2.5, I think. Yeah, I've been involved in water management all my life. I remember being a hose dragger, and making sure the lawn was green. And started off with that picture, but got better. But anyway, that was a fun picture.
Yeah, I was the first automatic irrigation system. I used to take the hose and stick it on the front yard. My mom would turn her egg timer on, and when it was finished, I had to go move it to another section. So that was my first greeting into the automatic water sprinkling.
Oh, my dad had a voice-activated one.
Ah,
Stephen, go water.
I love it. We tried a little bit to get some, to get some background or maybe quote unquote dirt on you, right? So we talked to like Ed Matthew and Cameron Passy, who I know you know both those gentlemen, and but they said they had nothing but good things to say. So tell us about a little bit more about more water management, right? Kind of where you're at today.
Well, I just as I wrap up my career, and I've got lots of years left in me, and but I want to find ways that I can improve water use efficiency. And one contract we got going right now is to look at water use school by school and compare what their actual use is and what they should be using, and then begin to diagnose what can be done to improve water use efficiency, whether that's looking at the control system, the settings within the control system, or can the irrigation system be improved? And in some cases, we may be looking and saying, do you really need turf here? Is there more water-efficient plantings that could be replaced? That we could replace that turf with more efficient plants. So that's the work I'm involved with right now. But I've also been helping others with smart irrigation control systems. It's been a fun project.
Well, the green industry tells us to water, deep and less, more deep and less frequently. And, to me, it sounds like great advice, and to others especially, but it also seems vague. So how can water managers put this into practice?
Rob, the very first time I heard this, I was at a seminar, this is back in the 80s, and Dr. Frank Williams from Brigham Young University got up there and he says, I water my grass in the summertime every 2 weeks. I put down 2 inches of water. And I thought he was, I thought I was worried about him because I wasn't, is he really sane? How could you water once every 2 weeks? And that was my first exposure to deep, less frequent watering, and that was really to the extreme. I've heard of others doing it, and I've seen some other projects since where you can water deep and less frequent. But it is confusing. What is deep, and how often? And so this is where smart control technology really comes in to help us with that effort. But why are the horticulturists begging us to do this? Well, it all has to do with plant health, because we have to first of all remember that the soil is a reservoir to hold that water, and if we're holding that water, if we've got nice deep roots, and I sometimes use the big gulp example. I say, okay, how much Coke can you get out of a 32-ounce big gulp? Well, it depends on how much ice you put in the cup and how deep you put the straw in, right? Yeah. And so if you have deep roots and you've got a certain soil characteristic, then that's going to be the holding capacity. And the deeper the roots, the more that soil can store. And as you water less often, you also end up with, almost a mulch effect, because the energy to evaporate is now being shielded by the plant and that upper thatch layer. And the roots are down deep, and they're getting a drink and provided by that plant the water it needs. The other big mistake that people oftentimes make, and why the horticulturists say deep, less frequent watering, has to do with air. Roots need air as much as they need water. And when we overwater, we starve those roots of the air that they need. And when that happens, the roots stay shallow because they're trying to breathe. And so if we can get into a management practice that waters deep and less frequent, then it's going to be healthier for the plant, and we're going to use less water. This is where the irrigation industry, talks about managed allowed depletion. So it's all about letting that soil moisture be depleted as a result of evaporation. And then once it's depleted, then it's time to water again. And, you can do this manually by watching the grass and dragging the hose when you know you need to. But certainly don't set that timer to water every day. That's the worst thing we can do to plants, and it wastes so much water.
Yeah, that is true. Chris?
Yeah, you've been working with ET-based control systems for, a good part of your career, for sure. And so, Steve, when you go back and think about that, starting with as you mentioned, the Rainbird ET Manager, which is, what's logged in my mind from way back then. Can you help our listeners understand a little bit more about ET? I'm managing like the chat board here, and a couple of folks asking about what's ET.
Good question. Thanks for asking. It's again, it goes back to those Rainbird days. Rene Evelenbeer, he's one of the patriarchs in this industry who really introduced me to ET. And I'm going, what is ET? Well, it's evaporation, and it's transpiration. Well, we know what evaporation is. We've been doing that since we were in elementary school. But transpiration is really evaporation. The difference is we're evaporating that water through the leaf itself. And the leaf, because of the cells of that leaf, they want to hold on to that water. So there's some resistance to evaporation. And but you have energy sources that drive that evaporative process. You've got sunshine, you've got temperature, and wind. Wind is just it's not really an energy source that causes evaporation, but it accelerates the evaporative process. And then you got to introduce humidity, because when you've got really high humid conditions, it takes a whole lot more energy to evaporate water off the soil or through the plant. And so those are the factors that are affecting evapotranspiration: solar energy, temperature, relative humidity, and wind. Those are the factors. To be able to actually measure the actual evapotranspiration is a very costly and complicated process. And fortunately, has been good science over the last 40 years that has provided algorithms to calculate evapotranspiration. It's really the estimate or the potential for evaporation and transpiration. And once we know the potential for evaporation and transpiration, then we can start building an irrigation schedule. But that potential, and I think it's important that people understand when they talk about an ET controller and, I'm watering to ET, they're watering to the potential ET. And if they're just watering straight to ET, they're probably wasting water, because the theory behind the potential for evapotranspiration is that water is readily available to evaporate. And as I mentioned, when you water deep and less frequently, that water is not readily available. You actually end up with more transpiration than you do evaporation if you've got those roots down deep. So the industry has taught us to utilize what has been called crop coefficients and landscape coefficients and density coefficients, means to modify that potential evapotranspiration number to tune it in and dial it in more toward the specific landscape and plant conditions. And ideally, this should be calculated on an hourly basis. Unfortunately, we still see a lot of folks calculating ET on a daily basis, but you really need hourly data in order to get a good calculation. Hope that helps. Any questions on that? Does that make sense?
No, it does, and I appreciate you bringing up the granularity of the fact that you can make ET even more valuable if the period between measuring is much more refined, right? An hour versus a day. But we've lived in this industry for years with living with just daily data that's available to us. So, that's a great piece of insight.
Yeah, I was talking to a gentleman the other day who recognized that they were had some serious mistakes with their ET calculations. Sure. They were at the mouth of a canyon, and in the mornings, you got canyon drainage winds, very high winds. Well, that was the morning. No sunshine, high humidity, and the temperature was cool, but you had lots of wind. But when you took that on a daily basis and you took that average wind run for the entire day, when in the afternoon the wind wasn't there, but the humidity had dropped, the temperature was up, we had sunshine, they had the wrong ET. it was off by a significant amount because they were using daily averages as opposed to making an hourly computation.
Yeah. Well, I know that several years ago you developed a smart control system and sold that business, and today there are God knows how many out there, and then starting from companies that are more into computers, and then they're getting into this kind of business, into that. And, I always look at ET systems. And you've been to some of the meetings that I had to give presentations and me to you. But, to me, I see it as a whole feedback loop because, ET tells you when you need to water. And I always like to connect soil moisture sensors into that with a smart clock, only because that tells you how much you need to replenish the water. But what can you tell us about smart controllers that you've seen over your career?
Well, I think there's smart controllers, there's smarter controllers, there's smart operators, and not so smart operators.
True.
I think you have to look at both sides of this. You've got to look at the technology, how the science has been implemented in that control system. And you have to look at that operator. I mean, there's over 20 variables that have to be programmed into a smart controller in order to get it right.
Yep.
Soil moisture sensing, I have found I can do a great job without soil moisture sensors. We can drive frequency and runtime by just running a real-time moisture balance. That's going to be the best. That's a really simple way of doing it. And we then don't have to go to soil moisture sensing to ground truth it. There's some value in doing some ground truthing with soil moisture sensors, but I think it can actually become a little more problematic than it needs to be.
Does that play differently in an agricultural world versus a landscape world?
In the agricultural world, they're living and dying by that crop.
Yeah.
In the turf industry, it's just got to be green, and so we already have a tendency to overwater. And so if you're going to be a diligent steward of that water resource, then certainly go with both. But we certainly don't see the high demand for that level of efficiency on the turf market.
Yeah. I concur.
But the thing you have to look at with a smart control system is, okay, what's making it smart? What are the inputs? Unfortunately, we've got some folks that calculate ET just by using temperature only. And there are formulas to do that, but they're not that accurate. Because it's missing the cloudy days. Your temperature doesn't tell you the wind. It doesn't tell you the humidity. So you need to look at that. If that's the only input to calculate ET, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Secondly, what are you doing with rain? Go ahead.
No. I was going to say, a lot of companies on the smart controllers say, well, they put 20 years of historical data in their thing if they're not getting signals or whatever to get it. I always used to call that hysterical data because I talked to Dr. Allen, who is, I don't know if he's still at Kansas City State University, but I think if you have a week's worth of that information, you could get by for turf. And these smart clocks aren't cheap these days. They haven't been since day one. And the more complicated ones are more accurate if they're used properly. And you gave the good example that there's good controllers, there's bad controllers, there's smart people who know how to use them, and there's people that aren't so smart to know how to use them. So those are things. And I agree with everything you've said. So I just wanted to comment on that.
In our age of communication technologies with Wi-Fi or the internet and cellular, we can get the data to that controller. We don't need to start compromising with minimizing let's just take a temperature reading and call it good. those did make a difference, but we can do better today.
Absolutely.
The other thing that probably frustrates me the most, to be frank with you, is that too many of the smart controllers don't really account for rain properly. In the West, we don't think about rain as much as we do in the East or in the Pacific Northwest. Much of our country, you get more rain than you do ET. And so we get all jazzed about, I got a good ET measurement. Did you measure rain? Well, it's raining, and so we're just going to turn off the controller. Okay, well, that's fine. How long are you going to leave it off? If you're going to do a moisture balance, and that's the way they do it in agriculture, you're going to take an ET measurement, and you're going to take a rainfall measurement and put that into a moisture balance. And again, a moisture balance is kind of like a checkbook, right? What's the withdrawal from that check? What's the depletion? What's coming out of that balance? It's going to be evaporation, transpiration. Well, what are the deposits? Well, that's going to be rain and irrigation. And so once the checkbook gets low enough where it's time to make a deposit, if it hasn't rained, it's time to irrigate. So that's pretty simple. But if you're not measuring rain, you can't have a good solid moisture balance. And so that's one of my pet peeves, is we've got too many smart controllers that are just using a rain shutoff device and not really measuring rain. And part of the problem with rain is it's so localized. ET Manager, we had the capabilities of doing an on-site tipping rain gauge. And those things are not that expensive. And they're just a little more money than a rain shutoff device, and far more accurate. And now you're getting a number as opposed to, is it raining or not raining, kind of an input.
Right.
So rain's a pet peeve for me. I think we got to do a better job on rain. And then, making it easy for users, because it's so complicated. If we have to recognize the complication and make sure we respect the science, but help that user get it right. Because there are landscape conditions that have to be entered. There's irrigation system capabilities that have to be entered. You may have watering restrictions and over 23 variables. So how do we make that easy? And I've seen some companies that do a great job, and other companies that have really done too much compromising.
Yeah, I agree.
Steve?
Chris,
I was just going to say, Rob, we got a couple of minutes left here, Steve, and I want to give you a chance to talk about more water management, just a little bit for our guys that are listening here, and just tell them that not only are you passionate about water management and you're a pioneer in the industry, educator, guest lecturer, and all that sort of stuff, but what's happening today with more water management? How can people find out more information about it for our listeners?
Well, thanks for asking, Chris. One of the wonderful things we learned in COVID is that we can work remotely. And I learned that in my Aerosoft days, too, as I was helping Rainbird customers across the country, helping them learn how to use smart controls. But now where we have the internet technologies and being able to do a Teams meeting or Zoom meeting, I can help water managers throughout the country. And these systems can be complicated. So give me a call. Let's get online. Let's take a look at your system and see what we can do to improve efficiencies. It's very common to just start off by saying, here's my initial settings, and you leave it there. How do you then fine tune it if things aren't working right? Well, we'll just turn it off because it's not working. It works. Let's just get the settings right, and let's see if we can dial that in. And I can help anybody anywhere with that type of a resource.
How can people get a hold of you?
They can go to the website at morewatermanagement.com. They can call me at 435-770-3896. And they can also email me at steve@morewatermanagement.com.
Great. We're coming up against our NBC News Hour that we have to turn it over to them because they're the guard of this radio show. So we appreciate that. We want to get back to you maybe in a couple of weeks and follow up with some other things and talk about some projects you're working on. If you want to share that with us, and give some hints to some of our people out in our listeners, maybe they can become a little smarter. So, Steve, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Enjoyed it very much.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.
Everybody. Yeah. So thanks a lot, everybody, for listening in today. And give Steve a call. He's, I tell you, for the 18 years I know him, he's a really smart guy. I totally, seriously respect him a lot in the industry, and he knows his stuff. So we'll be back in another week. We have some good shows coming up. And one thing that Chris and I always want to tell our listeners is please help keep our planet blue. Because if you like green, you got to have blue. So good night, everybody. Have a great week. Have a safe weekend. Have fun. And tune in next week, and we'll be back with some great stuff. Good night, everybody.
NBC